Hello guys, today we will be talking about what if Naruto went back in time. If you enjoy this video please like and subscribe. Now let's begin. He looked around the class, a small smile on his lips. He remembered this day, even if it had been more than 12 years before. Soon, Iruka would walk through those doors. Soon, Mizuki would follow. Soon. Soon the rest of his life would start to play out and he would be able to change it if he wanted to change it. He flicked a stray strand of blonde from his face. Blue eyes scanned the room one more time. Kiba was in the back room, a wide grin plastered on his face. Shikamaru was in the back too, on the other side, sleeping. Hinata was in the back as well, meekly poking her hands together. As his eyes roamed, he noticed the rest of the 9. Ino, Choji, Shino, and finally his teammates. Sakura, meek shy little Sakura, that would grow to become a monster in her own right. Sakura who would eventually be able to pulverize mountains with her bare fists. Sakura that would grow into a woman, strong and independent. A healer, a friend, eventually, but now she was a girl. A shy meek girl sitting in the middle of the class trying her best to be ignored. He wanted to go up to her, grasp her hand in his and scream. Believe in yourself. Tell her that she'd end up becoming one of the strongest women on the planet. She glanced up at him, a quizzical look on her face, before she let out a blush. He smiled at her then turned to Sasuke. Naruto had vague memories of Sasuke as a child. He didn't know how he held up now. As doors slid open. Iruka walked in, Chunin vest on, that long scar on his nose, and a small grin on his face. Naruto smiled too, then, realizing the man would still hate him, stopped. What was he going to do? As he was now, he couldn't do anything. No, he could do something. It just wasn't very much. Hello class. Hello sensei. They chorused out in union. Let me call roll, and we can have introductions, huh? I hope I have a good year from all of you. Naruto zoned out as Iruka started to call roll. His mind drifted to more important things. He had 2 years before the Uchiha was wiped out. 2 years, and he had no clue as to what the hell he was going to do. Naruto. He snapped as he heard his name yelled, accompanied by the sinners of his classmates. Sorry sensei. I was daydreaming. Iruka looked annoyed. Pay attention Naruto, don't make it a habit of yours. Lest you fail, or others pick up such habits as well. Iruka stared at him down, brown eyes staring into blue. He remembered this, he almost smiled, almost. But instead he stared, boring into the man's soul with his own blue eyes. Watching, unblinking, then suddenly, Iruka looked away. Hi, sensei, I won't let it happen again. He smiled, then frowned as he watched Iruka flinch. Beneath of your desks is a book. These books are a class set provided to each student that goes to the academy on a yearly basis. As you age and progress you'll get a new one every year. You should take care of these. They will contain homework and assignments and losing or damaging your text or excuse for not completing your assignments. Now, let's get started with today's lesson. It's simple to read the first chapter. It's simple. After that we'll have a short chat and go outside to do some exercises. How do that sound? Naruto stopped for a moment to cast a casual glance at his book. Smiled when he realized it was pathetically easy, then re-shifted his thoughts back to his own problems. Right now the greatest of his efforts would be attempting to deal with the Uchiha clan. 2 years seemed a while away, yet it wasn't. It'd be here before he realized it. Should he attempt to thwart it? No. That was stupid. The Uchiha were planning a coup, he'd have to find a way to stop the coup. Keep the clan from being subsequently persecuted, all the while trapped in the body of a 6-year-old. He wouldn't be able to savage them, and even if he could Naruto. He snapped his attention back to the room. You're supposed to be reading the first chapter. He blinked for a moment. He'd forgotten how much of an ass Iruka had been before he started liking him. I already know the material sensei. Do you? Hi. Fine. Iruka smiled. What are the ninja ranks within the village? Genin, Chunin, Special Jounin, and Anbu. Naruto frowned. Should he even be revealing this much? He knew things he wasn't supposed to. At least not as a 6-year-old. But it was too late now, wasn't it? What's the difference between a Special Jounin and a Jounin? A Jounin passes the Jounin exams. A Special Jounin is promoted. He paused for a moment. How to word it? His vocabulary couldn't be too advanced, it would raise red flags and draw attention to him. But then, we're waiting for skilled medics and can heal the wounded. They have skills that would place them in the Jounin skill range, but it's specialized. Iruka was quiet. The classroom likewise. Naruto stared up at him, blue staring into brown once more. Very good Naruto-kun. It seems you do know the material contained for this chapter. I'll expect the same performance from you from now on. For an instant Naruto was worried. He was being careless already. The class went on, and after an hour Iruka started to lecture. Quickly going over points as he strived to cram as much of the class's experience he could in a single day. Going over talking points through the lecture, before finally declaring it was time to leave the room. Once everyone was outside Iruka decided to speak. Every day we'll spend some time outside. He pointed at various targets. Some were human-shaped, others were simple targets, large and circular with big red and white concentric rings that got progressively smaller. Today will be target practice. Tomorrow we will test your physical capabilities and see exactly how we're going to rank you. Kiba raised his hand. Yes, what's your name again? He blushed and the children laughed. Kiba, my name is Kiba, Iruka-sensei. Thank you Kiba-kun. What's your question? Will be ranked yes. Throughout your next few years your academic and physical performance will be scored and ranked. These rankings will be used to help us decide team placements when you graduate. Now, he pulled a scroll from his vest. Spreading it on the floor and running a bloody thumb over it, a set of kunai appeared in a puff of smoke. Let's go over safety procedures and how to handle these properly. Wouldn't want any accidents, would we? Iruka let out a small chuckle and rubbed a hand behind his head. It was at that point that Naruto zoned out once more. Over the years he'd forgotten just how mind-numbingly boring most of the academy could be. Now that he knew all the things it would teach over the next few years, it would be even more so. He sighed, a frown forming on his face. He was useless as he was now and would be for quite a few more years. It didn't help that he seemed to be recklessly doing things without thinking. Asg good job Naruto-kun. He bowed with a small smile on his lips. Thanks Iruka-sensei. He exclaimed at the man in a slightly louder tone than normal. He smiled as he looked at the looks on the other children's faces. XXX starting Small's lunch came and Naruto sat at one of the tables alone. Hungry. The small grassy field was filled with kids of all ages running around and interacting with one another. His blue eyes cast around and already he could see the old groups from his childhood start to consolidate. Choji and Shikamaru were sitting beneath a tree watching clouds while the larger boys snacked on both their lunches. Oh god, he was so hungry. He sighed and placed his forehead down on the lunch table. He'd forgotten his lunch at the orphanage in the sudden rush of his technique actually working and him actually passing through the channel's time to the past. Now he is hungry, so goddamn hungry. His stomach growled. Hey, he raised his head, small hands coming up to block the blaring light of the noonday sun. The sun blacked out the figure before him, but after a few seconds he could finally see. It was Sasuke. Short, little, almost adorable Sasuke. With a timid look on his face and a bento box in hand. Blue shirt and short white khakis. His hair falling to either side of his head, though the early signs of his strange hairstyle could already be seen. Hey, a pregnant pause filled the air for a moment. This didn't happen last time. What should he do? What should he do? He made a decision. Want to sit with me? Sasuke smiled and sat almost as a Jinchuriki he would without a doubt be watched. His words analyzed, his actions thought over. No doubt the interaction with Iruka earlier this morning would be told to the Sandaime. If he started acting differently stupidly, he didn't know what would happen. But then again, did he want to keep the time stream as it was? He'd come back to change things, why not start off right away? Why not prove himself as someone skilled and talented enough to warrant everyone's respect from Thejiko? Why not place himself as someone Sasuke would respect, listen to, befriend? Someone Sakura could lean on. Someone Jai-san could be proud of from the start. What was the point of shearing away the veil of time if you didn't use the opportunity to completely change things? But then, he needed to be sure of certain events. The Uchiha had to die, he'd stay away from them as far as he could, at least until after the massacre. Naruto, would you like to go first? He heard the classes snickering again and looked around slightly confused. Iruka had a kunai in hand. Blade first, so he could easily grab it. He grabbed the handle and waited for the man to release it before he pulled. Iruka seemed surprised then smiled. It seems you were paying attention, that's good. Why don't you try hitting the circular targets? It's not expected of you to hit the bullseye the first time. Just try to hit it in general, okay? I'll make suggestions to help you, okay? He looked around for a moment. The other students' eyes were glued on him, watching intently to see how well he would do. Most notable was Sasuke. His onyx eyes seemed to be boring into his body. Watching intently with anticipation. A small smile on his face. Naruto almost laughed, He looked so innocent. He turned his attention back to the kunai. They were small and lighter than normal. The sides were slightly dulled, though the tip was still razor sharp. In the midday fire country sun they gleamed. He hefted them to get a sense of balance. There were 5 targets and 10 kunai. He grinned. Threw the first kunai with a swing of his arm and a flick of his wrist. It sailed past the target and he heard the chuckles of his classmates behind him. They were lighter than he was too, not too much so, but still. That throw had been way over what he had estimated. He went to grab another kunai and this time grinned. He hefted it once more and with a flick of his wrist, sent it flying. It hit. Not a bullseye, but it was a second ring. He smirked as he heard the other kids fall silent. Yeah. I'm Naruto. Good to meet ya. He reached out a hand and the other boy seemed startled, but then, with some hesitation, Sasuke extended his hand and the two shook hands. What are your hobbies? Naruto had a feeling he'd have to drive most, if not all of this conversation himself. Well, I like to train. Especially with my Aniki. I like to spend time with my aunt and uncle as well. Those aren't hobbies. Well, what are yours then? Sasuke asked. His voice sounded indignant. I like, He couldn't remember anything he did at this age other than go to the academy. I guess I don't have any hobbies either. He blushed in embarrassment and a small smile appeared on the other boy's face. Well, what do you like to do? Well. Suddenly there was a shout. Naruto turned to the source. It was another Uchiha, this one 3 or 4 years their senior. Naruto arched an eyebrow at the teen. He didn't remember much about the Uchiha, and from what he could, this kid seemed to fit the bill. Tall, pale, with a sharp yet somewhat squared jaw. Dark brown hair and a white shirt. Black short khakis and a ninja holster on his leg. Naruto smirked. He'd forgotten about the whole "don't talk to the demon brat" thing. That might get annoying in the future as he tried to influence things in the small way he could. When he was a child he would have cared more that he was ignored. Now he didn't care, and most importantly he knew with enough time everyone would eventually come around to his point of view and/or side. So when the nameless Uchiha came over, shouting how Sasuke-sama shouldn't associate with such trash, he kept a small smile on his lips. As the kid forcibly dragged Sasuke away, Naruto waved and smiled. It was nice talking to you while I could, Sasuke. Maybe we can talk more later. Then he was alone. God damn it, he was hungry. XXX starting Smolsk's lunch came, and Naruto sat at one of the tables alone. Hungry. The small grassy field was filled with kids of all ages, running around and interacting with one another. His blue eyes cast around, and already he could see the old groups from his childhood start to consolidate. Choji and Shikamaru were sitting beneath a tree watching clouds, while the larger boys snacked on both their lunches. Oh god, he was so hungry. He sighed and placed his forehead down on the lunch table. He'd forgotten his lunch at the orphanage in the sudden rush of his technique actually working and him actually passing through the channels of time to the past. Now he hungry, so goddamn hungry. His stomach growled. Hey, he raised his head, small hands coming up to block the blaring light of the noonday sun. The sun blacked out the figure before him, but after a few seconds he could finally see it was Sasuke. Short, little, almost adorable Sasuke. With a timid look on his face and a bento box in hand. Blue shirt and short white khakis. His hair falling to either side of his head, though the early signs of his strange hairstyle could already be seen. Hey, a pregnant pause filled the air for a moment. This didn't happen last time. What should he do? What should he do? He made a decision. Want to sit with me? I'm Naruto. Good to meet ya. He reached out a hand and the other boy seemed startled, but then, with some hesitation, Sasuke extended his hand and the two shook hands. What are your hobbies? Naruto had a feeling he'd have to drive most, if not all of this conversation himself. Well, I like to train. Especially with my Aniki. I like to spend time with my aunt and uncle as well. Those aren't hobbies. Well, what are yours then? Sasuke asked. His voice sounded indignant. I like, He couldn't remember anything he did at this age other than go to the academy. I guess I don't have any hobbies either. He blushed in embarrassment and a small smile appeared on the other boy's face. Well, what do you like to do? Well, suddenly there was a shout. Naruto turned to the source. It was another Uchiha, this one 3 or 4 years their senior. Naruto arched an eyebrow at the teen. He didn't remember much about the Uchiha, and from what he could, this kid seemed to fit the bill. Tall, pale, with a sharp yet somewhat squared jaw. Dark brown hair and a white shirt. Black short khakis and a ninja holster on his leg. Naruto smirked. He'd forgotten about the whole "don't talk to the demon brat" thing. That might get annoying in the future as he tried to influence things in the small way he could. When he was a child he would have cared more that he was ignored. Now he didn't care, and most importantly he knew with enough time everyone would eventually come around to his point of view and/or side. So when the nameless Uchiha came over, shouting how Sasuke-sama shouldn't associate with such trash, he kept a small smile on his lips. As the kid forcibly dragged Sasuke away, Naruto waved and smiled. It was nice talking to you while I could, Sasuke. Maybe we can talk more later. Then he was alone. God damn it, he was hungry. XXX starting small XXX. The evening came, and with it the end of the school day. Naruto stood outside the academy waiting for what he wasn't sure and watching the kids slowly parade about until their parents came to retrieve them. He cast a look at the blue sky above that was slowly transitioning to a deep orange. He should head back to the orphanage. But his memories of that place were far from fond. So for a few more minutes he'd stay here. He looked around. Sasuke was still here. Hey Sasuke, he jogged over in a light, yet fast pace. Hello. You waiting for your parents to come and get you? Yes, I'm waiting for my mom. My dad is the police chief for the Konoha police force, so he can't come and pick me up. Cool. He smiled at Sasuke. Are you waiting for your parents? No. I'm an orphan. I'm supposed to walk back to the orphanage with some older kids after classes, but they left without me. So I'm here until I'm ready to go home. Sasuke seemed shocked. Then smiled apologetically. Sorry. About at lunch, I don't know what that was about. Naruto laughed it off. A wide-toothed grin birthing on his face. Don't worry about it. I'm used to it. Sasuke-kun, you made a new friend already. Naruto turned to the voice. It was a woman. A tall woman at about 5'8", with black hair and pale soft skin. She smiled down at them. It was a soft motherly smile, one of triumph, the smile of a mother whose words had come true. Ka-chan. This is Naruto, he's in my class. Naruto bowed deep at the Uchiha matriarch. Hello, Uchiha-san. And so polite too. And adorable. See Sasuke-kun? I told you you'd make friends no problem. Ka-chan, Sasuke moaned. Naruto chuckled. He'd never seen Sasuke pout before, and being 6 made it all the more enjoyable. Naruto-kun. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to go take little Sasuke-kun away from you for now. We've got to go home for now. Hopefully see you tomorrow, of course. Uchiha-san. She smiled at him, grabbed Sasuke's hand, and pulled him away. Starting small. The orphanage loomed overhead like a monolith. He'd mostly forgotten about this place. But as he stood before it the memories flooded back. His small room in the back wing, the mean bullying children, the uncaring matron, he scowled. He hated this place. He remembered seeing this place leveled after Pain's attack and feeling happy that this place had been. He sighed and walked in through the 2 large wooden door. Hey there, Shrimp. He turned to the sound of the voice. It was another kid, about 2 or 3 years older than him. Akashi. His memories of the boy were vague too. This was so long ago, dressed in a black shirt and long tan pants. Akashi was a little over a foot taller than him. With curly brown hair that seemed to twist in and around itself more than anything. Brown eyes set in a small chubby face. He ignored him and started to walk to what he thought was his room. Akashi got in the way. Where you going, Shrimp? To my room. That just seemed to make him angry. So you got a mouth on you, Shrimp? What did I tell you about that mouth of yours? He ignored him and tried to move on. Akashi pushed him to the ground then sent a right hook into his jaw. Naruto got up, a snarl on his face. When he was 6 he was too weak to do anything when this bully chose him as his victim. When he was 6 he wasn't a trained ninja and his body was weak. But now? Now he was a trained ninja, and even if his body was weak he still knew about fighting like one. His foot drove into Akashi's crotch. The boy crumpled, and his foot came down on his head. The other orphans stopped. He drove his foot down a second time, and a third time. A fourth and fifth. A sixth and Akashi stopped moving, his blood was pooling on the floor, leaving from his mouth and nose. As the rage left him, he looked on in horror. Fuck, fuck, fuck.